Hey, it's me, Kayla. I am one of the hosts of a podcast called A Little Wicked, and this is our YouTube channel. We will eventually start recording with both of us, but it's been a long time since I've posted on here, so I thought I'd give you guys a little bit of one of our episodes. Our episodes can be found on Spotify, Apple, anywhere you get your podcasts, and they are uploaded weekly, and we cover true crime, conspiracies, cults, mysteries, really anything that we find interesting to talk about. So today we will be discussing Pearl Lusk and the story of her and Olga. So, Pearl Lusk came to New York City in the autumn of 1946 after graduating high school in Quakertown, which was not far from Philadelphia. She lived with her mother and stepfather in Brooklyn until getting a job as a salesgirl in a department store and moved to an apartment in the Upper West Side of Manhattan. After moving up, she started dressing up and doing her hair and makeup and made friends with her coworkers and always went out with them and started going on dates with men that she had met. On Thanksgiving that year, a man tried to pick her up on the subway on her way to her mom's house. She talked to him, but she didn't give him her name or her address. He told her his name was Alan LaRue. She would go on to think of him often, but at the time she was happy with how her life was and she did not want another man in it. Everything was going great for her until she got laid off on Christmas Eve. She once again ran into Alan on the subway the day after Christmas and agreed to get off with him at Times Square to get a drink. She told him about losing her job, and he was sympathetic, offering her a job if she wanted it, and she accepted. The next morning, she got ready and was to meet him around the corner from a building at 42 West 39th Street at 9:30 a.m. He told her he was a private detective working for an insurance company that specialized in insuring jewelry and in recovering jewelry when it was stolen from clients. He suspected that a woman named Olga, who was private secretary to the owner of the Croydon Hat Company, with offices in the building on West 39th Street, had stolen jewelry from a client and was carrying it pinned inside her clothes. He said she knew him and his face, so he couldn't do the job, and he couldn't arrest her without proof that she had the jewels. Quote, "Here's what I need you to do. First, go up to the offices of the hat company and ask the receptionist if Miss Sadie White is working there. There isn't any Sadie White, but while you're talking to the receptionist, you'll get a good chance to look at Olga so you'll know her when you see her again. She sits just outside the door that leads to the private office of the owner, and here's a photo of her. I'm going to get you to follow her around when she leaves this afternoon." End quote. Pearl did as she was asked and came back saying she memorized her coat, and her hat. Alan said there's a reward in it for her. He told her to go to see a movie or something until later when Olga gets off work at 5 and to meet him at his apartment at 204 East 17th Street at 3:30 p.m. Until then, she saw a double feature and called some friends, then met up with Alan. When she got there, he showed her what he called an X-ray camera. It looked like a shoebox with a hole at one end and wrapped in brown wrapping paper with a short piece of wire hanging at the bottom. He told her to point it at her and pull the wire. The X-ray picture will show us if she has the jewels. Take it behind her at 2 to 3 feet away, and afterwards meet me where we got drinks and I'll take the camera. Pearl went back to the building, saw Olga, and followed her to Times Square subway station, sat near her until her train reached the 55th station in Brooklyn, followed close behind, pointed it at her, and pulled the wire. Hoping she got a good pic, she went back to meet Alan. He asked her how it went, and how she took it, and how close she was, and if Olga noticed. Pearl said she wasn't more than 2 feet away, and Olga hadn't noticed. He said he'd get the pic developed tonight, and she would come to his apartment in the morning. The next day, he said he didn't turn out well at all, and he would need a few days to get a better camera and call him in 3 days. She called him and wanted her to meet him at an automat near Union Square at 8 a.m., December 31st, which was the following day. This time, the box was bigger and heavier with a string hanging out of the bottom wrapped in Christmas paper. He said he wanted her to go to Olga's station in Brooklyn where she got on to take the pic in Times Square when she got off. He said, "Remember to aim it at her waist. That's probably where she's carrying the jewels, pinned inside her dress at the waist." Pearl did it, followed her, and pulled the wire. Only this time there was a loud explosion and the box nearly jumped out of her hands. Olga screamed and fell on her back, holding her left leg, which was nearly blown off. A guard ran up asking what had happened, and Pearl was splattered with blood and said, "I just took a woman's picture and someone shot her." A man came up and put a tourniquet on Olga's leg, and a policeman took the box and opened it to show a sawed-off shotgun. Pearl had started to cry. She said, "I'm awfully sorry I shot you. There was this new job, and I thought I was taking your picture with an X-ray camera." And Olga just said aloud, "Well, he got me this time. Now if he wants me, he can take me. I'm crippled. I wonder what happened to the police. He must have been too smart for them." So it would come out that the last 2 months, Olga told her story to the police many times, and here's how it would go. Her husband's name was Olga Rocco, and they were married a year and a half on May 14th, 1945. They separated in April 1946, and in early October 1946, she met with Rocco in the West End Express on the way to work. They talked and got off at the 9th Avenue, crossed over, rode back to 55th Street because his car was parked at the exit of the station. He offered to drive her home since she wasn't feeling well, and he drove to Manhattan with a knife held against her throat and ended up going towards Poughkeepsie, where he rented a cabin and stayed there for 2 days. He had a shotgun and a revolver and the knife. He drove them back to a place in New York 2 days later where he went to a gun shop and got a revolver. He got in the car and held the gun to her temple. They went back to Poughkeepsie and got another cabin for 3 more days. Then back to Brooklyn where she went to her niece's and collapsed on the steps. On November 1st, she was in her kitchen setting dinner table with her mom. She suddenly felt a sharp sting in her right leg, and it was bleeding, and she saw 2 holes in her thigh. She called the police and was in the hospital for 10 days. She saw Detective O'Brien, an assistant DA, and a stenographer. She told them about the kidnapping and the cabin, and she was sure it was Rocco who shot her. She went back to work on December 9th with her sister when they saw Rocco on the station. She called police when she got to work, and she was afraid that they told her She called police when she got to work, and she was afraid, and all they told her was that just not to worry. Rocco then called her that morning, saying that he was watching her and that the next aim he would kill her. She told the police, who again just told her not to worry about it when she asked for an escort. She saw him again a few days later lurking around. He called her work every day, and she would call the police every single time, asking for an escort, only to be told not to worry about it. She saw him again on the station, and this time ran to a guard for help, asking if she can stand with him as she's scared. The guard told her no, and to stand across the walkway where he can see her due to it just being rush hour. She got on the train and went home. She saw him around December 20th and told the police, who said they'd send an escort, and they ended up driving her home. She told them about the threatening calls and the 5 days in the cabin, and on the 30th, she went to see Police Inspector Reynolds and told him about the calls, the shooting, and the stalking. He then called the station and asked them if they were waiting on a murder case and told them to have detectives waiting at her home. On December 31st, there weren't any police waiting at her house, and then the shooting happened with Pearl, and she was taken to the hospital, and her leg was cut off 6 inches above the knee. After the shooting, Pearl was taken to West 30th Street Station and told her story and shown a picture of Rocco and said that that was Alan. All they knew of him was that he would disappear for weeks and return with money and a new car, and was vague about how he made a living. After some violent quarrels with Olga, they separated, and he told her he would kill her if she didn't come back. Police discovered in 1938 that he was in the business of stealing cars in Manhattan and selling them in the Bronx, and he was arrested then and served time back then. So 6 days after the shooting, a trail picked up in the Catskills where in a stolen car he forced farmers at gunpoint to give him food. 50 state officers and 2 New York detectives found him parked and him sleeping under a spruce tree. They fired a warning shot, and he fired back and was killed. Pearl and Olga eventually became friends, and for years Olga hoped for compensation for her leg as she and her lawyer believed the police were negligent. A case came up for $200,000 in damages brought by Olga against New York. The trial lasted for 5 days, and the justice dismissed Olga's claim as it was Pearl who shot her, not Rocco. So that is the story of Olga, Pearl, and Rocco, or Alfonsi. So he did not really, he didn't really get away with it, but there wasn't particularly justice. He was just shot by the police firing back another shot at him after they already shot a warning shot. So if you guys are familiar with the story, or even if you're not familiar with the story, let me know what you think about it in the comments. You can subscribe here. You can follow us on any of our socials. We are on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, under A Little Wicked. And like I said, we are trying to post more on YouTube. We post every single week on our podcast platforms. We talk about really anything that we find interesting. So if you enjoyed that, you can also find us on Patreon. We are on Patreon for $4 a month. You get bonus episodes and ad-free episodes. Well, let me know what you think about that, and I'll see you next time.